Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is the end of January wrap-up. So, I've already started filming this video. It is before I talk about the 3 books I have finished and what's currently in process. This video is already very close to an hour in length, and unless I can be the height of brevity today, it's going to be well over an hour by the time I'm done. So, question for the comments. Do you want me to go back to weekly updates that are shorter in length, or do you prefer the long format? Let me know. I don't have a preference one way or the other. Editing this morning, it has seemed very scattered, but that's just me. So, okay. Here's the video that's been edited already. Okay, it's update time. I am, however, going to refilm my Pamela clip. Not that you would know that when you watch this, but it was just a little too scatterbrained, and I've had a longer think on it, so I'm going to talk about Pamela first. And it's undoubtedly not going to be a short conversation again, but Anne has done a deep dive video. Anne and I don't quite agree on it, but I will explain that as I talk about Pamela. So, this is Pamela by Samuel Richardson. It was published in 1740. It is sometimes hailed as the first English novel. Do not agree with that literary assessment in any way, shape, or form. And I will explain why. So, the book purports to tell the story of Pamela, and it's subtitled Virtue Rewarded. So, Pamela is 15 when the book opens. She is in service. She is what can best be described in modern terms that you would understand is a lady's maid, and her mistress dies. And in her will, she, bequeaths money to the service of the household. And she also bequeaths Pamela to her heir, which is her son. This time Pamela is 16, and he is initially benevolent. He allows Pamela to continue to study and read like her mistress did. And you learn all this as Pamela writes letters home to her poor, impoverished parents in a village that is, for the time, some distance from the house in which she lives. And thus begins the problems of this book. It's told entirely in epistolary, and it is told entirely from the viewpoint of Pamela, who I believe, as the novel closes, is 17. In my version, that's 500 pages later. And she is a prodigious writer, journal keeper to her parents. She records every conversation and interaction in her day almost, and it is only her side of the story. It is only her remembrance of conversations, most of which are written down hours after they occurred. And it becomes very clear very quickly that the master, as Pamela refers to him through most of the novel, or the book, wants more from her than just a employer-employee relationship. He offers to make her his mistress. She declines and says, "No, sir, my virtue, my virtue." She writes to her parents about how she's protecting her virtue. He's frustrated. He releases her from service and says, "You know what? I'm just going to ship you home. Here's some cash. Go home." Pamela believes him, gets in the carriage, and lo and behold, he kidnaps her. He then proceeds to falsely imprison and hold her captive in excess of 45 days with the help of his servants, a new housekeeper named Mrs. Jukes, who at one point in the novel, I'm just going to say novel because that's what's going to come out of my mouth. And I just realized I forgot to turn on the light. Hang on. Okay, I'm probably not so dark anymore. Maybe I am. So, at one point, with the help of Mrs. Jukes, they pin Pamela down in bed and he attempts to rape her. There's no question that is what's going on in the text. Pamela, as you would rightly imagine, freaks out, has what is known as an episode, and it so scares him that he stops, and the very next day declares that he wants to marry her, and she's in love with him, and all is forgiven, and yada, yada, yada. Eventually, these two insufferable people get married, and by the close of the book, there are, I need to tell you exactly how many because it is so mind-blowing, it actually hurts my brain. In excess of 40, here we go, 48 rules he lays down for Pamela as his wife, who never, by the way, calls him by his name, on how she should interact with him. And the shorthand version of all of those rules is that she should always be subservient, submissive to him, and everything she should do should be pleasing to him. She should always be up and dressed and ready to happily receive guests, no matter what else is going on in her life. She should never disturb him when he has a bout of anger until he cools off. She should never talk back. It's just endless. And that pretty much sums up the book. So now let's talk about the actual book. So, the actual book. I am positive that Richardson did not intend this when he wrote it. However, it is my opinion that it could only be read as satire. No two people who are normal and healthy and have a relationship with God, which I'll talk about in a minute, behave like this to one another. I don't care how far back you go in time. No woman has ever been this meek and this phony and this manipulative. I don't know another word for her. I consider Pamela a completely unreliable narrator. I consider her a characterization of what Richardson thought the ideal woman should be, which was basically to be silent, available, and never think for herself. Even in English history, by the time this book was published in 1740, there were numerous examples of strong women in British history. They were not, these hidden figures in time. They were not people that it would have been unknown to Samuel Richardson. We only have to go back to the Tudor era to, discover strong women who were faithful and women of God, and they did not behave like this. It is inconceivable to me that this is anything more than a satire. There is a satire version of this book penned by Henry Fielding called The Adventures of Pamela. I am going to order it. I'm going to read it because it cannot possibly be any worse than this novel was. I know Anne has read it and thinks it's much worse than this novel was, and that's okay, because opinions differ on books all the time. Now, do I consider it an English novel? I absolutely do not. Do I think it is a step on the road to writing an English novel? Yes. Am I now trying to trace that path in my own reading? I absolutely am. And the reason I don't think this is an English novel, I think it's coming close, but it isn't there yet, is that there is no character development. There is none. We have a plethora of characters. They are all told from one character's perspective, and there is no plot line. I'm just going to say it. There is no plot line. It is very apparent from the beginning what is going to happen, and that just, completely matches the end. There's also the fact that over the course of his life, this novel was revised multiple times, and depending on the version you read, the story differs. So, I read an Oxford World Classic version. It is the original 1740 text with no revisions. In the later revisions, he talks about how they grew up together, how Pamela's parents were once of a similar rank in society, and through misfortune and the shenanigans of her older brothers, the family lost their fortune and now their circumstances are greatly reduced. That is not in the original text. In the original text, Pamela is very clearly a servant and he is very clearly of the aristocracy. And it is an employer-employee relationship. And he also, as the book progresses and once they're married, he very much treats her as a father and she is a child. It is not a marriage anything close to two equals. It doesn't even hint at that. It is just, here's what I say and here is what you will do, and she immediately acquiesces. It's incredibly unbelievable. Now, do I think Fielding is going to take this very poor depiction of a character and twist it 180 degrees and be the opposite side of the coin? He absolutely is going to. I have no doubt about that. But I bet you anything, she's going to be more entertaining. Because Pamela in Virtue Rewarded is insufferable. She is just insufferable. And all of her English ancestors of the female nature, and most of men, would be like, what are you doing? I could go on for days. I haven't yet written my blog review for this because I'm trying to formulate how I'm going to write all that out. But I need to. I am not sorry I read the book. You can see the, Austen inspiration for Darcy and Elizabeth. You can see all that, but this is not a novel. This is not a love story. This is not a romance. This is a writing experiment that is very much a religious text. It is, Fielding was Methodist. That is, this is a religious text. It is not yet a novel. It has set me down the path to read from this point forward, trying to find the first one that is truly a novel format. I did not anticipate that journey starting this year, but, it's January and already the plans have changed. And I'm okay with that. So, do I recommend everybody pick up Pamela? No, probably not. It is infuriating to read. It is just infuriating to read. However, if you like English literature, if you've read a lot of English literature, if you want to trace the beginnings of a novel, then yes, absolutely go back, read Pamela by Samuel Richardson, and, understand going in that this is going to be just mind-boggling. I spent more time on Discord. By the way, the Discord discussion on Anne's server is fantastic. I will link Anne's Discord server in the description box. And these are all of my annotations for this book. I have post-it notes of just notes in the middle of text. I have many of them. This book was vexing and irritating and lovely and educational and so many things. But for me, it is not a novel, and it is most definitely satire. There you go. Okay. That is Pamela. What else have I finished at this point? That's all good. But first, we're going to do the Pamela announcement. When I filmed the Pamela clip, I thought that would be good, and, that would be the end of Pamela. However, my brain had other plans, and so there is now going to be a new series, and it is called The Road to the First English Novel, and my extended Pamela discussion releases on the 3rd of February, and I'm just gonna, read novels between, the release of Pamela and the release of Evelina in 1776 to find what I consider the first true English novel. So, I will bring you along. It should be interesting. My brain is hungry for it. Thus, the journey. Okay, first up would be Jane Austen's Genius Guide to Life by Haley Stewart. I read, or I should say, I DNF'd the chapter on persuasion because when an author quotes me Dr. Cornel West as somebody I should respect and look to direction for, that's not happening. The man is a blatant racist, and everything that comes out of his mouth is hateful, and I will not read anything that quotes that man as being worthy. Okay, and now we come to Misshelved Magic by S.R. Crickland. This is published by Prism. It came out in November of last year. This is Catholic fantasy, and I do love the cover. This is the first book in the Luminal Library series. And I enjoyed it. However, it's going to get a 2. I love the setting. It's set in a library. It's set in a fantasy world. There is magic in the world. But there is nothing Catholic about it. There is some very generic Christian faith. And by generic, I mean this book easily could have been published by Revell, Bethany, Tyndale House, any of them. There is nothing Catholic per se about this book. It was incredibly disappointing. I kept searching for the allegory, and I kept searching for the, nugget of faith, and it is not there. It was highly, highly disappointing. Yes, there is talk of a higher power, but it is incredibly generic. It is really a fantasy story with a thin icing of Christianity allegory laid on top of it. It is very unfortunate. It is the first true miss for me from Prism. The first couple of chapters are very compelling. I was falling in love with it. And then it just left me wanting more. Where's the faith? Where's the Catholicism? Where is the reason I bought this book? It was a generic fantasy book. Is it great that it's set in a library? Yes. Did I need to read another set in a library fantasy with characters in their early 20s? No. I mean, there are thousands upon thousands of those. There was really nothing that stood out for me in this book, and yeah, I was highly disappointed. Like highly disappointed. And when I say it's a 2, it is skipping off of a 1 into a 2. Chances are very high that even though I liked the characters and the story, I'm not continuing the series. There was nothing in it to recommend it moving forward, unfortunately. Okay. So, that is Misshelved Magic. So what else? Okay, new filming location today. I'm actually still in my living room where our bookcases are, but Pickles is having fits this week. He's not eating, he's not being friendly, so he's on his tree. I'm close to him. He's happy at the moment, and he's actually eating, which I'm thankful for. Am I super happy that it's an English muffin with, strawberry jam on it? No. But it is food in his belly, which is what I care about. Okay, what have I recently finished? These are not in any particular order, mind you. So, first up would be Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. This is book 3 in the Dune saga. This is a 25 and 25 book for me. And I have some thoughts. Thoughts begin with, it is better than Dune Messiah. Of course, that is a very low bar in my book, but it is still better than Dune Messiah. So for that, So, as I was saying, the trashman is here, and Fireball does not like when they steal her trash. Children of Dune is better than Dune Messiah. Is it as good as Dune? Oh, no. No, it is not. No. Dune, I read it just before I started Booktube, so probably November, December of 21. Dune, I read in 2 days. I couldn't put it down. I was fully invested. I loved everything about Dune. I had the exact opposite reaction for Dune Messiah. And to be honest, Children of Dune is landing smack dab in the middle of those two. I believe when I rated it on Storygraph, I gave it a high 3, but it's a definite middle of the road for me. So, if you haven't read Dune, I'm just going to give a brief summary for Children of Dune. It tells the story of the hero of Dune, the villain of Dune Messiah. His twin children are the subject of book 3. Our hero from Dune is, dead. His younger sister is now the regent for his twins. Their mother is dead, and his sister is, going crazy. So the twins are roughly 9 years old, and they are the culmination of a lot of things. And they separate to go on their different paths. So it's very hard to talk about this book without spoilers, and thus the very lackluster description thereof. If you hear Pickles in the background, I am sorry, but yeah, he's not coming over here because he'd like to chew my drapes. And Children of Dune, no, takes you on this. I say that, I'm going to have to go pick him up in a minute. Takes you on this very twisty journey. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have grabbed Pickles. What was I saying? Oh. Children of Dune tells us very interesting but convoluted story of the twins and their path to power. And I loved it. I hated it. If you go near my drapes, you are in trouble beyond words, mister. Come here. So these twins have all the genetic memories of their ancestors going back millennia. So while they may be 9 years old, they are the very epitome of what it means to be an old soul. Best way I know how to describe it. And while I enjoyed the book, I could put it down for days at a time, read something else, and come back to it, read some and then put it back down. So it wasn't life with a bird. The intention grabber that Dune was, I got to deal with this. Hang on. Okay, we did some bird maintenance. Let's see if that helps. This has been very scattered. I apologize. I should probably just start again. Children of Dune is probably much better on audio, especially if there's, I don't know if this exists. I haven't checked. If there's like a fully dramatized version of it, or at least a female and male voice actor for it, narrator, that would help the narrative tremendously. The influence of Islam is very apparent in this book, like much more so than it was in the previous two, as was the, for lack of a better description, climate activism of Herbert. And neither of those detracted from the book for me, but there was a definite influence that was very evident. And I enjoyed the book, but did I enjoy the book to read further in Dune? That is a question I don't have the answer to yet. The chances are very high that the answer is no. Like, I absolutely loved Dune. That book was fantastic. It was science fiction. It was political drama. There was family drama going on. It was all the things I love in a book. And the next two just didn't live up to Dune. So I probably just answered my question, didn't I? Am I sorry I read them? No, I am absolutely not sorry I read them. I truly enjoyed it for what it was. But is it an all-time favorite? No, it is not. Okay, what else have I finished? I did finish 2 short stories in Dracula and Other Horror Stories by Bram Stoker. I read Dracula's Guest and The Judge's House. Dracula's Guest was atmospheric and tense, but it wasn't scary or horrifying. It was, dare I say it, predictable. And on the other hand, The Judge's House was atmospheric and tense and definitely creepy. And I was glad I read it during the day and when Dave was home. They're both short stories. I don't want to give anything away in either of those short stories. But yeah, The Judge's House was definitely by far the superior of the two. Like, hands down, not even close. So I am looking forward to reading more of that next month. Okay, what else have I finished? I have also finished Catholics by Brian Moore. This was an impulse pickup on Kindle Unlimited. It is a novella. I have never read anything by Brian Moore, and this was published in 1972. And I don't want to say too much so I don't give it away if somebody is looking to read it. But I have a couple of quotes I want to read you, so let me pull those up. And then I'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so I found them. Why is it so hard? I'm going to read you a quote first. I'm instead going to tell you the synopsis. An American Catholic priest is sent to Ireland to a monastery that is self-contained on an island offshore of Ireland itself, and his purpose is to quell the international fervor these Irish monks have started when their masses went viral on the internet. This was clearly set in the future. It does not give... Hang on. It does not give a date, but it's clearly not in 1972. And the state of the Catholic Church in this novella is... So, the state of the Catholic Church in the novella is what I would consider in a very bad place. However, it does have echoes for what we're currently seeing within Catholicism. And I don't want to go into it so that if you decide to pick it up, you can go into it with a clean slate. I am going to read you a quote. And that is, and if the Mass was in Latin, if the Mass was in Latin and people did not speak Latin, that was part of the mystery of it. For the Mass was not talking to your neighbor, it was talking to God. That is so profound, and it isn't the first time that appears. In fact, it appears in a bigger paragraph just ahead of it. And it says, Jesus, it is the priest and the people praying to God. They're talking about the Mass, assisting in a miracle whereby Jesus Christ again comes down among us, body and blood in the form of bread and wine there on the altar. And the Mass was said in Latin because Latin was the language of the church, and the church was one and universal. And a Catholic could go into any church in the world, here or in Timbuktu or in China, and hear the same Mass. The only Mass there was, the Latin Mass. Again, that is an incredibly powerful statement. Page or two later, it makes the same point in a different way. Again, we're talking about the church and Mass. Almighty God. And we did it that way for nearly 2,000 years. And in all that time, the church was a place to be quiet in and respectful. It was a hushed place because God was there. God on the altar, in the tabernacle in the form of a wafer of bread and a chalice of wine. It was God's house where every day the daily miracle took place. God coming down among us, a mystery. Just as this new Mass isn't a mystery. It's a mockery, a sing-song. It's not talking to God, it's talking to your neighbor. And that's why it's in English or German or Chinese or whatever language the people in the church happen to speak. Those quotes greatly encapsulate a lot of what not just I, but a vast portion of the church finds so distressing at the attempts to stamp out the Latin Mass and to silence those of us that prefer it and do not understand the move to a very Protestant, very showy Mass. And there's one more quote. Faith of our fathers living still in spite of dungeon, fire, or sword. Oh, how our hearts beat high with joy whenever we hear the glorious word. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. We will be true to thee till death. Now, those are lines from the hymn Faith of Our Fathers, which is traditionally sung by Catholics at Christmas time. However, it is a very good reminder that those that went before us had it much worse than we think we have it. And sometimes having a bird is such a joy. And I truly loved this novella. I don't know if the author is Catholic. My guess is that because he's Irish and born in Dublin, the chances are higher than not. But I don't know that he's Catholic. I do know that this, less than 100-page novella was, written more than 50 years ago. And we're perilously close to some of the things that take place in this novella. I will give you one example that makes me shudder even to think about it. Lourdes is shut down. And private confession no longer exists. Don't get me started. This is just a giant novella of warnings and red flags, and I'm sure it wasn't meant, to be a prophetic novella, but oh boy, is it a prophetic novella. And I need to read more of him. I do. His writing was beautiful, and yeah, I need to read more of him. So, okay, I believe that's everything. I'm up to date on reading. I have finished everything in Sarum. So episodic reading will be done today, and it will come back when that is finished. And yeah, it will be good to get almost all of my very staggering January TBR completed. I am very much looking forward to February. So that is today's update, or the first of today's updates. Okay, so what have I completed at the end of the week? First up, I have completed the Innocence of Father Brown section of the Complete Father Brown. And that is a collection of, I believe it's 12? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yep, 12 short stories. And they are all incredibly wonderful. So if you have watched the Father Brown miniseries and you pick this up, there is a difference between the miniseries and what Chesterton wrote. The miniseries moves Father Brown further ahead in history, sets him in a fictional village, and introduces people into his life that are not in the books. Flambeau is in the books, but he is a very different Flambeau in the miniseries than in the books. Okay, so the stories themselves. I loved every single one of them. They are all approximately 10-ish pages or so. And what you get is a very tightly plotted mystery that if you are not paying attention, you will miss the very subtle clues to solve it, but they are there. And the Father Brown from the miniseries is very much the Father Brown in this book. In the books, he is much shorter than he is in the miniseries, and that's fine. However, the partnership that develops between Flambeau and Father Brown is just a joy to read. Blumbo is introduced as a villain in one of the stories, and he is shown the error of his ways, and he is a reformed character thereafter. The Innocence of Father Brown takes place in London and the surrounding area, and it is just this beautiful mix of mystery and characters and psychological study of the human nature and theology. And there's one very familiar story in here that is The Eye of Apollo. It and its miniseries counterpart are among my favorites. I loved the written version more, but the miniseries version is excellent as well. And these stories are pure comfort and pure, it's a rainy day like it is outside today. It is very gray, wet, and warm here today. And it is the perfect day to curl up with Father Brown and just, be transported to an England in a period of flux and this very quiet, learned priest solving crimes that appear to be unsolvable. And they're just delightful. And I need to go talk about it on Discord. I haven't done that yet. I've been letting it percolate. I will get to it today. They're just delightful. I don't know a better way to describe them. I can very easily see this being a comfort read and something I will pick up and just read a short story and, get out of a reading slump or reset my mood or, have a wee bit of theology with a cup of coffee in the morning. So, okay. And up next, we have the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. This is my bind up of his signature classics, and these are fascinating. So I read the Screwtape Letters as part of Epistolary January. I've been wanting to get to Lewis's apologetics anyway, and so I started with Screwtape. Screwtape is a senior devil, and he writes letters to his nephew Wormwood, who is currently a tempter up on Earth. And these are all written in the form of advice from uncle to nephew on how to do his job better, to tempt his quote-unquote patient in straying from his newly found Christian faith and coming over to the side of evil. And all of those tabs are just for the Screwtape Letters. I could have tabbed much more, but I was trying to restrain myself. And there's something these letters were written, if I recall correctly, during World War II, and they were for an English audience. And in fact, the war is described in some of them. Maybe they were released right after the war. Anyway, the important thing here is that what Lewis is talking about in the 1940s is very much relevant to 2025. And I want to read you a passage because this one really hit home for me. And this is not part of the letters itself. It is part of a novella that was published. I say novella, it's really an article that was published in the Saturday Evening Post in, I want to say 1960 something. And it is called Screwtape Proposes a Toast. Yep, 1963. And he is addressing a graduate class of tempters about to matriculate and get their first assignment on Earth. So I'm going to read you a paragraph. For democracy, or the democratic spirit, in the diabolical sense, leads to a nation without great men, a nation mainly of subliterates, morally flaccid from a lack of discipline in youth, full of cocksureness, which flattery breeds on ignorance, and soft from lifelong pampering. And that is what hell wishes every democratic people to be. For when such a nation meets in conflict, a nation where children have been made to work at school, where talent is placed in high posts, and where the ignorant masses are allowed no say at all in public affairs, only one result is possible. One democracy was surprised lately when it found that Russia had got ahead of it in science. What a delicious specimen of human blindness! If the whole tendency of their society is opposed to every sort of excellence, why did they expect their scientists to excel? Really? There is a very giant lesson there. The entire book is full of very giant lessons, and it reinforces the fact that history repeats itself. And that humans always have the hubris in their brokenness to think that they, in the present day, are better than their ancestors because they are more advanced, or they have escaped the bonds of religion. And if you read the Screwtape letters critically, you very quickly begin to understand the folly in that entire line of thought. So, yeah, I am a very huge fan, and the intricacies of Lewis's writing are beautiful, and I loved every word of it. So, okay, and the last finish for the month of February or January is a reread. And this is Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. And this is my choice for Amanda's Southern Comfort year-long reading challenge. And that is for the prompt of coming home. Because as the book opens up and Anne is driving back to Green Gables with Matthew, she says that it feels like she's coming home. And so far, this is the highest rated book I have read all year. I will tell you on Storygraph, I gave it the highest possible rating, which is a 5.75 stars, or in my new rating system, it got a Sagan. I will say that the Screwtape letters got, I believe, a 4, which is a Murakami, and The Innocence of Father Brown, I didn't assign a rating system to. I'm going to rate the whole book. And, however, first of all, I love the cover. I'm perfectly happy to pick these up individually since I cannot get them in a box set. Anne is a reread, and I was so scared after reading Little Women that Anne wouldn't hold up. And instead, Anne not only held up, Anne reminded me why I loved her as a child. And I cannot wait to read more. As you know, Anne of Avonlea is on my February list. I cannot wait to dive in. Anne's joy at life, Anne's always ready smile and willingness to dive into the unknown and, face her fears and challenge herself and love unconditionally is a beautiful lesson when you are a child and reading it and you really don't understand that's what you're getting. But to reread it as an adult and to understand the lessons that are Anne and that Anne gives you is, I will not be surprised if it is one of my favorite reads of this year. I'm gonna throw that out here on the 30th of January and just say, yeah, I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I was good right up until the end when Matthew died and I sobbed. I forgot that Matthew died in this book. And Anne had this amazing opportunity and scholarship to go to a four-year college and fulfill her personal dreams. And without even talking to Marilla, she gives up her dream so that she can take care of her family. And it is a beautiful reminder that family is irreplaceable and important, and we only get one shot with our loved ones. And never take them for granted. So, I could probably talk about Anne for hours, but I'm restraining myself. Now, I do know that I do not remember reading the rest of the books in the series. That doesn't mean I didn't. It means I have no recollection of it at all. And I generally have at least a faint recollection of reading books, but I don't remember reading anything from the rest of the series. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing it. I am just completely in love with her once again. And can I just say the Anne and Gilbert storyline was so fantastic. Anne's apology to Gilbert at the end is a beautiful thing to read. It is just a beautiful thing to read. So, I love this book. Am I reading? I have a bunch in progress. So first up would be Evelina by Frances Burney. Now this was published in 1776, and I am flirting with the idea that I may put this off until later in the year because it is definitely a novel. So between 1740, Pamela is published in December of 1740, and the publication of Evelina in 1776, we have an actual novel has been birthed somewhere in those intervening 36 years, and I just need to lay my hands on it. My guess is that it is Tom Jones by Henry Fielding, and so that is much higher on my list. So I may or may not finish this. I am 30 pages in. I'm loving it, but it may just have to wait. It may just have to wait. I started the Screwtape letters yesterday, by Lewis, and I am halfway through. I will probably finish those today. And the very first thing I flagged was Lewis. Did he, have we realized how much of a prophet he was when he wrote this? I'll read it to you. There are two equal and opposite errors into which our race can fall about devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves are equally pleased by both errors and hail a materialist or a magician with the same delight. Materialist. Yeah, we have a little problem right now in Western society with overconsumption and worshiping the material and everything that we can cram into our personal lives. So I am greatly enjoying the Screwtape letters. Also, probably finishing today, or I will definitely finish it this week, Anne of Green Gables. This is a reread for me. I read it eons and centuries ago when I was wee, and I'm definitely getting something out of this I did not get when I was small. I love Anne as a character. I love her just childlike innocence and awe, and how she is thawing Marilla's heart and bringing Matthew out of his shell, and just that. It is just pure joy. It is. I keep saving it for days in which it's very gray outside, or I'm tired and I just read Anne, and life is always better after picking up Anne. Okay, that brings us to, which if I could, I would ignore everything else I need to do today to finish this. The dust jacket is off, but it is The Children of Dune by Frank Herbert, third book in the Dune saga, and it is so much better than Messiah. There is a actual story. I'm completely invested. I am devouring this book. I am loving every word of it. It is definitely sci-fi. There's a definite story. There's definite good guys and bad guys. There's definite complexity built in. It's perfection. I don't say that very often, but it is perfection. And I think that is everything I have in progress. No, I take that back. I am currently on my Kindle reading Catholics by Brian Moore. This is a novella. I am halfway through it. I will talk about it in more detail when I finish it. And it too, this was written in the 70s. It is very much, it could have been written today. That's all I'm going to say until I finish it. But yeah, it's great. Okay, that's it for this update. And I will see you here when I finish some more books. Okay, what am I currently reading as I drop things on the floor? I am currently, this morning, I will finish before I finish editing, the second chapter in Rebels of Ireland, which I took the dust cover off. I have read the first chapter, so I just need to read chapter 2. And it is a Rutherford book. It is beautiful. It picks up exactly where the Princes of Ireland left off, which makes sense because they're a duology. And it's fantastic. If you have not read Rutherford and you are at all remotely interested in one of his subject matters, I highly recommend them. Highly recommend them. I cannot say enough. I will say that I have things in process on my Kindle, and what they are at the moment I couldn't tell you. I do have, hang on. So I am currently listening to Oathbringer. I am a third of the way through, and it's as fabulous as I recall it being. I am loving my time with these characters in this book and this story, and the apprehension for what happens in book 5 has not dissipated. But it's a situation where I need to rip that Band-Aid off. So I need to finish Oathbringer, and I need to be able to pick up Rhythm of War next month and read that one physically. I have read Oathbringer physically, and it is a reread. Rhythm of War is new, so I don't mind listening to Oathbringer on audiobook format. So yeah. Anyway, I have started. It wasn't trying to jump ahead. I was just going to save it for Saturday, but there have been a couple of comments on a couple of different channels trashing this month's book club choice, which is Jane of Austen by Hilary Manton Lodge, and without explanation. I don't want to say I was concerned, because I always make my own judgments about books, but I picked up last night and I read the prologue, and the writing is fantastic. It sets the scene very well. I'm invested. I have no qualms going forward. So if you have seen those comments, I don't see a cause for concern. I do not see any cause for concern or hesitation about picking up this book. And I know there are several new subscribers and new people in Discord, so please join us on Discord. Please, I know the book is available in libraries all across the country. It was not available in mine. And it's a Sense and Sensibility retelling. It works great for Amanda's February prompt, which is sweet food or tea. This is all about sweet tea and baking, so it's perfect. And I am looking forward to this. Okay. I think that is everything that is currently actively in progress. Like I said, I need to finish up a chapter in Rebels of Ireland today, and then pretty much January's reading is complete, other than carryover books. And if the weather continues, I am probably going to pick up, where is it? I've said it someplace else. Seeds of Doubt by Ralph McInerney. It's Catholic fiction. It's a Father Dowling mystery. I love Father Dowling mysteries immensely, so that will be great. So, that is more than enough. Let me know which format you prefer. Leave a comment. What are you reading? How are your reading challenges going? And I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.